Hey guys, welcome back to Prepco sessions on preparation for CAT. Today we're starting with a brand new topic, critical reasoning, and this is, as well the name says, very critical. It's gonna impact your exam obviously, but also how you think generally. Yeah, I know that's a very broad statement to make, but seriously, this is a very important class. It's a long one, but we're going to be discussing a lot of examples. This is not as ambiguous as a lot of you actually do think. Let's go. And now it's time to get into critical reasoning, one whole important section of your exam in itself. This is important. I don't need to tell you why from the exam perspective. But even otherwise, critical reasoning, let me tell you, since I've learned this and focused on this a lot, it's changed how I think. It has literally changed how I think, how I read, how I write, how I debate, how I argue, because critical reasoning goes to the heart of logic. And what is logic? Logic, to put it very simply, is decision making based on what information you have. So the first step is to analyze properly the information you're given. Then think, am I stretching too much by reaching this conclusion, or even, what conclusions can I reach? As simple as that is the process of logic. Well, simple in terms of defining it. Actually, it's going to take a lot of practice. But believe me, this practice is so worth it. Well, of course, from the exam perspective, you score much better. You need that accuracy, and a lot of practice is going to build your speed. More than that, in life, the way you think, the way you make decisions will completely change based on this. Let's get into defining this as soon as I can get my mouse working, which I can never do. Yes. Critical reasoning or logical reasoning, whatever you call it, it's about building a perfectly logical argument. And key to that is, like I said, understanding the information you're given, and only using that information. This is not a test of your general knowledge. Forget everything you know. If you're given a question on nuclear power and you're a nuclear physicist, ignore everything you know. This is not a test of your knowledge, and that's great, because for every one topic that you know a lot about, they could ask you on 100 others that you don't know enough about. So therefore, forget everything you know from the real world. Focus on distilling the information that is given to you. You're only working with that, and the question is, what else can you say based on that information? If a conclusion is provided, then is the information enough? Supporting information enough to reach that conclusion, or do you need more? That's the question. No prior knowledge. I repeat, ignore anything you know. Forget anything you know for the sake of the exam. Let's take a look at a sample question. So read this. You have a paragraph stem. You have a question. And you have options based on that. So the key here is to understand the question first, to know what the requirements are, what they're asking you to do. And accordingly, then you read the paragraph and start looking for information. And then obviously, eventually get to the options. But this is just to show you what a question looks like. We'll be discussing this later also once you've done some basics. How do you approach it? Think about very clearly what are the facts given to you. And be clear on facts. Facts versus opinions is a long debate that I could keep going into, especially since so many of my family members deal in WhatsApp forwards these days. Somebody will write something and you think that's a fact. No, you need to analyze if it is a fact or it is someone giving an opinion. I think Delhi is going to have a severe winter is an opinion. Delhi had the coldest winter ever this year is a fact. Delhi had a severe winter this year is also an opinion because you need to define severe. Coldest is measurable. Severe needs a definition. So you need to keep in mind, this is the most important, to be honest, figuring out what is a fact, what is an opinion, and drilling down and distilling data. This is a very useful skill in life, being able to distill data thoroughly. Then look at, have any conclusions been reached on the basis of these facts, or are they asking you to draw conclusions? That's it. This is it. So basically, yeah, identify the facts and premises and the conclusions, if any, are given to you. So for example, you are given two statements, two facts, so to speak. All letters are numbers and some numbers are alphabets. And you're given two possible conclusions. The question is, can you reach any of these conclusions based on the given facts? So if you look at the two options, the two statements rather, all letters are numbers. Draw a Venn diagram actually is the best way to handle these problems, syllogisms they're called, is to draw a Venn diagram. The set of letters is a subset of all numbers. And some numbers are alphabets. So therefore, the first thing you have to do is ignore real world knowledge. Because if you're asking how can numbers be alphabets, ignore all that. Ignore all that. Go with what's given to you. So all letters are numbers and some numbers are alphabets. So can you conclude without even looking at the options that all letters are alphabets? Draw a Venn diagram. It's a possibility. Is it a certainty? It's not. It's even possible that all numbers are letters, but that's just one case. Look at the conclusions. Some numbers are letters. If all letters are numbers, can you say all numbers are letters? No. It is possible, but it is not certain. Your conclusions have to be certain. This is a key in critical reasoning. Conclusions have to be what you can say with absolute certainty. 100% of the cases. Can you say in 100% of the cases that all numbers are letters? No. But can you say that some numbers are letters? Because all letters are numbers, then those numbers that are letters are obviously going to be letters. So yes, you can say that all or some numbers are letters. Can you say all alphabets are letters? That is a possibility. Is it a certainty that all alphabets are letters? In fact, is it a certainty that some alphabets are letters? Think about this. This is basically Venn diagram questions. The answer here is you can conclude that some numbers are letters. You cannot conclude that all alphabets are letters. Another one. All notepads are laptops and all laptops are desktops. So one immediate conclusion you can reach here is all notepads are desktops. If you make a Venn diagram, these are three circles, one within the other. Notepads is the smallest. It is a subset of laptops, which is a subset of desktops. So all notepads are definitely going to be desktops. Let's look at the conclusions given. All desktops are notepads. Think of that Venn diagram again. The answer is no. This is a possibility, but this is not a certainty. Therefore, this is false. As a conclusion, this is false. A conclusion holds if it is true in all possible cases. Here, that's not true. Therefore, this is a false conclusion. All laptops are notepads. We know that all notepads are laptops. Does that mean that all laptops are notepads? No. Notepads are a subset of laptops. They need not be the same thing. Therefore, both conclusions are false. We cannot say this with certainty. Look at it as a simple mathematical equation. Facts slash premises. Premises is a word that's used in. It's basically, premise is what is given to you. Hence, facts, the data that is given to you. Facts plus assumptions make conclusions. So basically, I am given some facts. I might be given a conclusion. Can I reach that conclusion with certainty on the basis of the facts given? If yes, I need no assumptions. If no, if something more is needed, more information, we will come back to that same example and it will become clear. If more information is needed to basically reach that conclusion and say with certainty, yes, this conclusion is true, then that information you will have to assume. Otherwise, there is no way you can reach that conclusion. Let's look at this question again. Now read it properly. Which of the following is an assumption that supports drawing the conclusion above from the reason given for that conclusion? So already in the question itself, they've told you that an assumption has been made. Which of the following is an assumption? Remember, facts plus assumption equals conclusion. Let's look at the paragraph. In recent years, many cabinet makers have been winning acclaim as artists. That's a fact. But since furniture must be useful, cabinet makers must exercise their craft with an eye to the practical utility of their product. That's a fact. Since furniture must be useful, so okay, one fact is, let's look at the facts we're given. Many cabinet makers have been winning acclaim as artists. That's one. Second, furniture must be useful. That's given to us as a fact. Then, cabinet makers must focus on practical utility. These three things are given. Cabinet makers have been winning acclaim as artists. Furniture must be useful, i.e., it must have utility, it must have practical utility. Therefore, what else we're given is cabinet makers must focus on practical utility. For this reason, cabinet making is not art. This is a conclusion that has been reached. This is what the author is saying. Now, what are we given? Cabinet makers are winning acclaim as artists. I'm repeating myself, but just to perfectly distill down the facts that are given to us. Cabinet makers have been winning acclaim as artists. Furniture must have utility. Therefore, cabinet makers have to focus on utility. Therefore, cabinet making is not art. Do you see a disconnect here? Think about it for 10 seconds. The conclusion is cabinet making is not art. Has a definition of art been given anywhere? How does the author define art? You can figure it out because the author is saying cabinet makers have to focus on utility, therefore cabinet making is not art. This is a stretch that is not clarified in the question itself, so therefore he has made an assumption. The facts that are given are not enough to reach that conclusion that cabinet making is not art. So what has he assumed? That anything that focuses on practical utility is not art. If this were given to you. Now let's add that assumption in to make it clearer. Furniture must be useful. Cabinet makers must focus on practical utility. Anything that focuses on practical utility is not art. Therefore, furniture or cabinet making is not art. Suddenly, this is a completely coherent argument. Do not get into the definition of art from the real world, that cabinet making. Oh, I know so many great cabinets that are arty. Real world does not matter. Look at it as maths. What are you given? What do you need to reach? Look at it as specific as possible. A lot of students have told me over the years that they find critical reasoning to be ambiguous. It can't be. The examiner, the exam setter, has to set questions in a way that there can be only one right answer. Can you imagine if in the CLAT or the GMAT or CAT you have a question with two perfectly valid answers? The exam goes for a toss. They can't afford that. They have to make sure that there are enough clues for you to pick only one option as the correct answer. So let's look at the options now. Some furniture is made to be placed in museums where it will not be used by anyone. Will this help you reach the conclusion that cabinet making is not art? We're not even talking about cabinet making here in the answer. It says some furniture, possibly cabinet making, but not necessarily. Not strong enough. And museums haven't been mentioned as relevant to the conclusion, so we will ignore this. Some cabinet makers are more concerned than others with the practical utility of the products they produce. So this says that some cabinet makers are more concerned with practical utility than others. We're talking about cabinet making as a group, as a field in itself. We're not specifying some cabinet makers over others. Therefore, this does not hold. C. Cabinet makers should be more concerned with the practical utility of their products than they currently are. Well, the question says cabinet makers must exercise their craft with an eye to practical utility. We need something that links the definition of art in the author's head to cabinet making. This does not do that. This just says they should be even more concerned than they are about the practical utility. D says an object is not an art object if its maker pays attention to the object's practical utility. If the author had said this, cabinet makers must focus on practical utility, and any object where practical utility is the focus is not art, therefore cabinet making is not art. This is now a perfectly logical argument. Therefore, what is an assumption? Information that should have been given by the author to make his argument complete. Now we have that information. If you add it in, the conclusion makes perfect sense. Ignore the real world again. The conclusion makes perfect sense based on the premises / facts that you're given. Let's look at option E anyhow. Artists are not concerned with the monetary value of their products. We're not talking about monetary value anyway, especially in relation to art. This is how critical reasoning questions work. This is the process. This is the start and the end of the process, basically. What data are you given? What conclusion can be drawn or has been drawn? Is there anything missing? So let's look at what kind of questions you can expect in a critical reasoning exam. Strengthen the conclusion. So here the question might say, which of the following would strengthen the author's conclusion? Which of the following has been assumed by the author? The key is the same. You are given certain facts. You are given a conclusion, as in the previous question. And your aim is basically to figure out what is missing, what is the gap in logic that is needed to make this argument complete. What information, if it were also given to you, would make this conclusion perfectly sound and a logical argument. Let's take a look at this example. So first read the question so you know what to expect, what you're looking for in the paragraph itself, in the passage. The conclusion above is based on which of the following assumptions. So you automatically know there are facts given to you, there is a conclusion given to you. You need to figure out what is missing. Traditionally, decision making by managers, in fact, you read it yourself for the next 20 seconds, then we'll discuss. So what facts are you given? Traditionally, step-by-step reasoned decision making has been considered preferable to intuitive decision making. A recent study has found that top managers used intuition more than middle or lower level managers. So these are the relevant facts. Top managers are using much more intuition in their decision making than middle or lower level managers. What's the conclusion reached? Intuition is more effective than careful methodical reasoning. So step-by-step reasoning is given in the first sentence. That's the link. Careful methodical reasoning is one technique and intuition is the other technique. You're given a fact that top managers have been found to use intuition a lot more, and the conclusion is therefore intuition is much more effective in decision making, is a much more effective decision making process than careful methodical reasoning. Think to yourself, is the conclusion sound based on the assumptions? Ideally, you should, once you've done enough practice, this will come to you. You should automatically, your brain should pick up the gap. What are you given and what is the conclusion? You're given, and simplified, managers are using intuition a lot more. Conclusion is therefore intuition is more effective. Sorry, top managers are using intuition a lot more. Do you see a gap there? Do you see any assumptions? Let's look at the options and see what we come up with. Methodical step-by-step reasoning is inappropriate for making many real-life management decisions. We haven't gotten into what's appropriate or not at all. It's not helping us reach the conclusion. It's irrelevant to the conclusion. So we eliminate this. B, top managers have the ability to either use intuitive reasoning or methodical step-by-step reasoning. Well, there are two techniques, so we assume they can all use them. This is not adding anything that will help you reach the conclusion. C, the decisions made by middle and lower level managers can be made as easily by using one method as using the other method. This is still not helping us reach the conclusion that intuition is more effective. Look at D. Top managers use intuitive reasoning in making the majority of the decisions. We've been given that. That's actually an assumption. The second sentence says top managers used intuition significantly more than did most middle or lower level managers. This is actually not adding any. This sounds fair, reasonable, but this is not adding anything at all to our ability to reach the conclusion. We need a link between top managers' use of intuition and intuition being more effective. Look at option E. Top managers are more effective at decision making than middle or lower level managers. If top managers are using intuition and top managers are more effective at decision making, then you can definitely say that intuition is more effective for decision making than the other approach. These two things are needed. Without this, you can't reach the conclusion. Otherwise, you're just saying top managers use intuition more, therefore intuition is more effective. You're actually assuming that top managers make good decisions more than lower or middle level managers. You could say, well, obviously that's how they became top managers, right? That's an assumption. You are assuming that. You need to bring that out in your argument. Critical reasoning is all about parsing the data and listing down what you have been given and what is necessary. And the more you use it, even when you're reading editorials in the newspapers, or any book in fact, or having a debate, the more you realize that it makes your decision making much simpler once you know what you're looking at and what you need. Weaken or negate the conclusion. Which of the following will weaken the conclusion? Which of the following would undermine the conclusion, challenge the conclusion? What is a gap? Again, you're given the premises slash facts, you're given the conclusion. There is a gap in logic. Now you need to weaken the author's conclusion. So essentially, last time you had to strengthen his conclusion, figure out what assumption, if true, would make the conclusion as strong as possible. Now you have to do the reverse. So what would you do? Think of an assumption and turn it around. Let's in fact go back to the previous question. Now, if you had to weaken the conclusion that intuition is more effective based on the facts given to you that top managers use intuition more, if you had to weaken the conclusion, you would actually say that middle or lower level managers have been found to make far more effective decisions than top managers. If you say top managers use intuition, lower level managers use reasoning, and the conclusion is that intuition is more effective, if suddenly you're given data that low level managers are much more effective, your conclusion is blown out. Suddenly you can't say that anymore. Look at this question. You need to now weaken the argument given above. Student X has shown an improvement of 50% in test 2. Y has shown an improvement of only 5%. Conclusion is student X has scored better than student Y. You need to weaken this conclusion. You already know there is a gap in logic. You need to expose that gap, point it out. So the facts are X has improved by 50%. So we'll come to that. Y has shown an improvement of 5%. And the conclusion is X has scored better. Now better would mean more marks in a test. That's fair to say. So do you already see a gap in the logic that you're talking percentages, but now you've reached marks? If the conclusion was that student X has shown more improvement, obviously 50% is greater than 5%. That's a very, very easy, simple conclusion to make. But better would mean more marks. What could you say to prove this statement wrong? Think of a case converting the percentages to numbers. And in fact, before reading the options, let's just think of that case. Let's say now you have to prove that student Y has scored better than student X, despite his marks having gone up just by 5%. So Y has a higher score than X. What would the possible cases be there? You have enough information now to proceed to the options. You're looking for something that says that, an option that says that Y numerically has more marks than X. So let's look at the options. Y has put in more hard work in test 2 than X. This would not weaken the argument. We know what we're looking for. We're looking for numerical evidence. X was more motivated. We're not talking motivation at all. This is irrelevant. Y had scored 90% in test 1, whereas X had scored 60% in test 1. So let's say the test is out of 100. Y had 90 in test 1, and in test 2 he has a 5% improvement, so he's at 95. X had 60 in test 1, and he had a 50% improvement in test 2, so he's at 90. Therefore, Y has still scored more than X, which would prove the conclusion that X has scored better than Y in test 2 wrong. This is your answer. Again, look at the facts, look at the conclusion, look at the gap. In a strengthened question, plug in the gap, fill in the gap. In a weakened question, expose it, make it shine, bring it out. The third major category, so these 3 categories will form 80% of your critical reasoning questions. In that sense, it's pretty straightforward once you have done enough practice in these categories. Third is, what can you conclude? What can you infer? Which of the following must be true? Keep in mind, pick an option which can be concluded with absolute 100% certainty. There can be no doubts about it. You might think this is a weak conclusion, is a DIY. No problem. That's fine. Don't even stretch by 1%. If there's even 1% cases where this would not be true based on the facts, it's a wrong answer. So here, in a conclude/infer question, you will be given facts/premises. That's it. What can you conclude on the basis of these facts with great certainty? Read this read this passage. What are we given? Researchers have been studying for more than a century how our genes influence our intelligence. Fair enough. And they say, yes, genes do influence intelligence and IQ. And the percentage can be anywhere from 40 to 80%. That's what we're given. So now let's look at the options to see which of these conclusions we can reach with great certainty. A century ago, our intelligence did not depend on our genes. That's not given anywhere. I won't say, haha, that's obviously false. Again, we have to go by what is given to us. It doesn't say that. It just says researchers have been studying it for more than a century and now have come to this realization. It doesn't say that till then intelligence and genes had no link. So this is wrong. We cannot conclude this. Genes may be the most significant contributing factor to some people's IQ level. How much do genes contribute to people's IQ level? Anywhere between 40 and 80%. If someone's genes are influencing 80% of their intelligence, then genes are the most significant contributing factor to those people's IQ level. This is the answer. Please note, if this had said genes may be the most significant contributing factor to all people's IQ level or everyone's IQ level, this answer would have been false. Because most significant means the biggest factor. So majority, like 51% would mean nothing can be bigger. 40% something could be the biggest factor if the other factors are like 30%, 25%, 5%. But it's not certain. At 50% or more, or 50.1%, it is certain that it is the most significant contributing factor. Nothing can be bigger. So therefore, we can't say for all people because some people are at 40%. If this were 51 to 80%, yes, all people. But we can't say this with certainty for all people. Therefore, if option B had said to all people's IQ level, the answer is no, false, because some people are at 40%. Some people, however, are 51 to 80%, even if it's 2 or 3 of those and everyone else is at the 40% bracket. Doesn't matter. Sum is any number more than 0. Therefore, this is definitely true. Some people, a non-zero number, a positive non-zero number of people will see that their genes are the most significant contributing factor to their intelligence. This is the answer. Let's discuss the other options. If genes contribute 80%, that person may be called intelligent. We haven't gotten into the definition of intelligence, just what influences it or how much genes influence it. We don't know the definition of influence anywhere as per the facts given, so we cannot conclude this. If a child is adopted, the percentage of his IQ level, I will stop here. Adoption is not talked about at all. Actually, genes, good point. So let's read this. If a child is adopted, the percentage of his IQ level that could be attributed to genes cannot be determined. We can't conclude this. We just can't, because nothing in the facts talks about how you determine something if he's adopted. The answer is B. Only pick an option which is 100% certain based on the data given. Other questions, these are a minority, but yes, you can still get them. Like, which of these has similar reasoning? What is the method of reasoning? Mimic the reasoning. This is basically you have to get deep into the argument itself. You have to think of, okay, in this question, in this passage, the author is doing so and so, he's laying out facts in such and such manner to reach a conclusion in such manner. And the answer will either be a description of that methodology, or it will be another passage which follows the exact same reasoning. So let's read this example. So it's a long story actually. What have we given? He procrastinates. He had to complete a report and hasn't started yet. The report is due tomorrow, therefore he has to work on the report tonight. He can finish it in time if he works all evening. However, today is his first wedding anniversary, so he also needs to go to a dinner. And the conclusion is, because of procrastination, he has to choose, which means he can only do one. If he's being forced to choose, he can't do both. So let's look at the options. It builds a case to establish that responsibility in one situation is similar to that of another situation. We haven't gotten into responsibility. Is he being more responsible by going for the dinner or by finishing the report? We don't know. We haven't talked about responsibility, so it's obviously not as similar. It's not a description of the structure of reasoning. B, it builds a case to feel sorry. No. It doesn't ask us anywhere to feel sorry. If the conclusion were thus we should feel sorry for him, yes, but it doesn't do that, so it's not building a case for us to feel sorry for him. C, with the help of an example, a case is built to demonstrate that procrastination is a bad habit. No, you have to describe the structure of reasoning, and nowhere does it say it's a bad habit. He's just being forced to choose between two things. D, shows that both the events are mutually exclusive by establishing that what is essential for one of the events, that should say, sorry, bad English, is incompatible with what is essential for the other event. Yes, the question says that it establishes that he has to choose between, he can only do one, he has to choose from between the two, which means they are mutually exclusive. And what is essential for one event, working on the report, is incompatible with what is essential for the other, going out for dinner. Therefore, D is describing the reasoning that's given to you. So how should you attack it? Read the passage, identify premises and conclusions. Do not ever read the options before you've thoroughly understood the passage. Very important. Do not do that, you will make a mistake. You might get one answer right, you will screw up in the other two or three. Read the passage, understand what they're asking for, what is given to you, and also you will be much faster this way. If you're skipping between the options question, you will lose a lot of time, and you will skip if you're not clear on the passage first. Think of gaps in the logic. Divide it into premises and conclusion and see if there's a gap or if it's perfect. Read every option, eliminate the wrong ones, and be sure this is true for any kind of question you're doing. Maths, sentence correction, reading comprehension, anything. You should be able to look at any answer, any option, and say why this is right or why this is wrong. Not feels right, feels wrong, or A is obviously right, so B must be wrong. you should also be able to specify why B is wrong. Some sample questions, just go through this. What is the fact that's been given? A claim being made by a leading MBA college that our faculty is the best. The question says the claim depends on which assumption, therefore you know what kind of question it is. It's a strengthen the argument, which means you're given some facts, you're given a conclusion, fill in the gaps, plug in the gap. So the claim is our faculty is the best, and they say attend our demo class and assess the caliber. Is there a gap that's jumping out at you automatically? Let's look at the options. A, the faculty is genuinely the best. Well, they've already said the faculty is the best. This is not an assumption in the argument. Or rather, even if it is, it won't help you reach the conclusion that attending our demo class will help you assess the caliber of our faculty. B, quality of faculty is an important criterion for the students. Still won't help you reach the conclusion. C, other MBA colleges do not invest much on the training of their faculty. Irrelevant, won't help you reach the claim made in the advertisements. Come to our demo class and assess the caliber. Does not talk about other colleges. D says students or prospective students, I would say, sorry, really bad English here on my part, know how to assess the competence of the faculty on the basis of a trial class. This is the key here. If you're saying our faculty is the best, come to our demo class and see for yourself. Students, that means students have the caliber to actually assess faculty on the basis of that demo class. Otherwise, this whole thing falls apart. Otherwise, the demo class is useless. But if you say our faculty is the best, you will be able to determine their quality, their competence on the basis of one trial class. Come for a trial class. That is now a perfectly logical argument. Next question. Which of the following further helps to strengthen the argument? So it's a similar kind of question. A research of undergraduate students has shown that students who do internships along with the regular college become better professionals than students who do not do any internship. So what's the conclusion here? Some students do internships, some don't. And the ones who do become better professionals. So there's very little given to you in terms of facts. Just that some do internships and some don't. The conclusion is that those who do internships become better professionals. So what do you need? You need some assumption to help you reach this conclusion. Right now you don't really have much in the way of facts. So let's see the options. Students who do internships normally intern with big multinational corporations. You need to get to better professionals. If this assumption were true, maybe it is. But still, to get to better professionals, then you would need another assumption that working with big multinational corporations makes you a better professional. You don't have that. So therefore, this is not enough. Undergraduate college students have sufficient access to guest lecturers and industry interaction, which provides them, I really need to be spell checking my presentations more, which provides them with good exposure of the corporate world. It doesn't help. Better professionals is the conclusion. We need something that helps us get there. Students who do internships acquire practical and relevant skill sets that help them to deliver their tasks effectively and efficiently. This is telling you about people becoming better professionals, acquiring practical and relevant skill sets that help them to deliver their tasks effectively and efficiently. Therefore, this is a valid assumption that strengthens the argument. D says students who do internships are extremely motivated. The key is better professionals. Now, is it a stretch to say that someone acquiring practical and relevant skill sets that makes him or her deliver tasks effectively and efficiently is the same as saying he or she is a better professional? It's much closer than the other options. It's basically using different terms rather than actually being a leap in logic. The others, I can very clearly say why they're wrong. This one, I would have preferred the answer to actually use the same term to make it clearer, but it's close enough. It's just using different terms rather than requiring more assumptions to feed it in. Last question. So an issue in dispute, this is more of a describe the method of reasoning or understand the method of reasoning and figure out more. What does Ramya say? Ramya says an abortion can result in medical complications later in life. The risk of ectopic pregnancies doubles. You don't need to know what they are. That's fine. And the chance of a miscarriage and pelvic inflammatory disease increases. So she's talking about the health risks that can come with abortions later in life. Amrapali says abortion is a safe medical procedure. So she's actually countering her doubt about health risks. The vast majority of women, 88%, have abortions in their first trimester. Medical abortions have less than 0.5% risk of serious complications and do not affect a woman's health or future ability to become pregnant. So the issue is a woman's health when it comes to abortions. Ramya says it can lead to a lot of complications and health issues. Amrapali says it's safe enough for most people. So an issue in dispute should be then on the health grounds because they haven't talked about anything. See, this is where I want you to be before you hit the options. We know that their argument, their disputes are about health. Which of these topics within the health? We'll see. And it says an issue in dispute, not the issue in dispute. So there are multiple then. It could be one of these points. But it has to be related to health because that's the only thing they're discussing. Let's look at the options. An issue in dispute, whether abortion should be legalized. Exactly. I can automatically eliminate this option now because legality hasn't been mentioned anywhere in their arguments. I don't need to spend any more time on this option. B, whether abortion increases the risk of ectopic pregnancies. Ramya says the risk has doubled. The risk doubles. Has Amrapali countered this? No. So it's possible this is an issue in dispute. It's possible it's not. We don't know. Based on the information, we can't say. C, whether abortion has adverse effects on a woman's health, thereby increasing the chance of miscarriage. This is the answer. Because Ramya is saying, yes, it has adverse effects on a woman's health. Amrapali is saying, no, it doesn't. Or it's inherently safe for most people. Thereby increasing the chance of miscarriage. Ramya is saying that chance of miscarriage also increases. Amrapali is not countering that, but the issue is health. I have to pick an answer. This is by far the best answer. Health is definitely in dispute. D says whether abortion is equivalent to murder. Not in contention at all. Neither of them has said that. Therefore, the answer is C. This is it for now. For this class, we'll obviously be doing much more practice and full tests on video. So stay tuned. Subscribe to our channel. If you like this video, it helps us a lot with YouTube, with Google overlords. And we'll leave links to the other videos and you should be able to see one pop out right here, right now for our modifiers class. For English, that's a very, very, very important class. So yes, stay tuned and keep watching. We'll be adding more videos on maths. We've already got our legal reasoning sections up for some exams. Stay tuned. See you.